Among space horror films, how do you remember Event Horizon? For me, it was never a good movie in the conventional sense. I still remember the sensation of being pulled into those blood-red steel corridors, the metallic groan pounding like the ship's heartbeat, and Dr. Weir's face staring straight into the camera as if he were looking through me. And the deeper I dug into the behind-the-scenes history, the more I realized that Event Horizon was even more terrifying than anything it was allowed to show on screen. A would-be blockbuster forced into a sprint by Titanic shot on hastily cobbled-together sets. Spacesuits so heavy that actors had to lean against metal poles just to avoid collapsing. And a 130-minute cut featuring a hell sequence so extreme that test viewers reportedly fainted before it was brutally chopped up and ultimately lost like a curse. So let's explore 20 unbelievable facts behind Event Horizon. Things many audiences in 1997 never knew. 20. Event Horizon, the haunted house movie that went too far. If I had to describe how it felt the first time I watched Event Horizon, I wouldn't say I was scared. I would say I was lost. Lost inside a ship that doesn't behave like a machine but like a living body, breathing, groaning and watching everyone inside it. Ironically, Event Horizon began with a very clean, simple idea. Screenwriter Philip Eisner, who never went on to have a particularly illustrious film career, took the script to Paramount and pitched it in a single line, a haunted house movie in space. Eisner was heavily influenced by Warhammer 40,000, where ships tear through space to travel faster than light, but must pass through dimensions filled with malevolent spirits capable of possessing the crew. According to IMDb, he wrote the script after a family tragedy, leading many to believe that Event Horizon isn't just imagination, but grief dressed in sci-fi. But whenever I watch the film, I feel this clearly. This isn't a haunted house. A haunted house has an exit. Event Horizon feels more like a possession ritual, a surreal nightmare where the ship isn't haunted, it actively worships evil. 19. Titanic forced Event Horizon into a fatal sprint. Some films are made slowly with care and polish. Event Horizon wasn't. It was thrown into the fire. Director Paul W.S. Anderson once believed he would have years to build his haunted house in space to shape every detail, every pause, every breath of fear. Then James Cameron's Titanic arrived and shattered that plan. When Paramount pushed Titanic from summer to late 1997, it left a massive hole in the release schedule. Their solution was brutal shove Event Horizon into that slot and demand a $60 million blockbuster delivered in just 10 months from greenlight to final cut. The set always felt like it was burning. Sets were nailed together in a rush, actors rehearsed while sawdust still hung in the air. Visual effects were locked at insane speed, with some shots completed while the paint was still wet. Anderson had just 6 weeks to edit the film, less time than many directors spend fine-tuning sound. The result was a rough, uneven movie stitched together under life-or-death pressure. And the real tragedy, the longer, darker cut the true vision Anderson wanted, was sacrificed. In the end, it wasn't the black hole in the film that swallowed Event Horizon. It was Titanic, another doomed ship that consumed everything. 18. Event Horizon wasn't designed like a spaceship, but like a cathedral. From the very first time I saw the Event Horizon, something felt wrong. It didn't look like a NASA ship. It looked like a cathedral adrift in space. Production designer Joseph Bennett deliberately drew from Gothic architecture, modelling the corridors after Notre Dame cruciform doorways, pointed arches, steel surfaces, evoking stained glass. Everything made the ship feel cursed rather than engineered. The engine core. The heart of the ship resembles a rotating altar bristling with spikes reminiscent of medieval torture devices. Shadows stretch like pews in a church. It feels less like the crew is exploring technology and more like they're trespassing in a place of worship. With one difference, the god here does not save. It demands pain. The ship has a presence that CGI can't manufacture. It doesn't just contain evil, it looks as though it was built for it. Not a machine, but a cathedral of suffering drifting toward damnation. 17. The real horror was in the costumes. On screen, the spacesuits looked sleek and futuristic. For the actors, they were wearable torture chambers. Each suit weighed over 30 kilograms with a rigid backpack that made sitting impossible. Standing for long wasn't an option either. The crew had to bolt metal poles into the floor so actors could lean against them, between takes frozen in place like mannequins. Sweat pooled inside the helmets, fogging the visors and cutting off air. On screen, it's sci-fi. Behind the camera, it was the Middle Ages. Lawrence Fishburne tried to keep spirits up by joking and naming his suit Doris. But humour didn't erase the reality strained. Backs bruised, shoulders, dizziness from heat. Walking through narrow corridors became punishment. Every step was a battle against gravity and exhaustion. A film about endurance, and its first victims weren't hell or the black hole, but the actors themselves crushed by the sheer weight of the suits. Sixth casting feels like peeking into a parallel universe. Have you ever wondered what Event Horizon would have been with a different cast? Paramount once considered Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, even Tommy Lee Jones for Captain Miller. Each choice would have pulled the film in a completely different direction. Willis as a battered everyman, Arnold as an unstoppable machine, Jones as a grizzled old soldier. But none of them took the role. Instead, Lawrence Fishburne stepped in calm, morally weighted, never shouting. 2 years later, he would become Morpheus in The Matrix. In hindsight, the choice feels almost destined. Dr. Weir followed a similar path. Bill Pullman and Scott Glenn turned it down. The role landed with Sam Neill, fresh off Jurassic Park. His descent into madness is chillingly restrained, recalling Damien from The Omen 3. Neill doesn't play a villain. He plays a human being torn apart from the inside. Looking back, Event Horizon was never a film built around proper blockbuster stars. It was built on choices that seemed accidental, but ended up anchoring very human fear inside a cosmic nightmare. 15. For Sam Neill, the role of Weir was a plunge into something that deeply unsettled him. There's a moment in Event Horizon that always makes me uneasy on rewatch Dr. Weir's gaze, when he smiles so calm it feels inhuman. It isn't the kind of evil that shouts. It's the look of someone who has accepted something very deep inside and no longer feels the need to justify it. To achieve that look, Sam Neill endured makeup sessions that lasted for hours. The effects team layered his face with grotesque prosthetics, torn flesh, eyes sewn shut, black veins snaking across his skin like poisoned rivers. Sitting in front of the mirror, Neill no longer saw a familiar human being, only a mutilated body staring back at him. Neill later admitted that the experience disturbed him in a way dinosaurs never did. Jurassic Park forced him to run from monsters. Here, the monster was himself. Every day on set meant confronting that image, then carrying it with him for the rest of the day. That raw discomfort flows straight into the performance. Weir's madness doesn't feel acted. It feels like a thread slowly unraveling, impossible to stop. In a film filled with screams and blood, Sam Neill delivers the most frightening truth of all evil isn't out there. It's in the mirror, waiting for you to look long enough. 14. Fishburne was mentally crushed by the set as well. Lawrence Fishburne is no stranger to heavy material, but stepping onto the set of Event Horizon shook him in a different way. Narrow steel corridors stretching endlessly, blood-red lighting washing over every surface, the sound team constantly testing screams and metallic groans, making the air feel perpetually hunted. Walking those corridors between takes didn't feel like acting. It felt like wandering inside a nightmare that refused to fade. Fishburne later admitted that there were nights he struggled to sleep after shooting. The atmosphere of the ship clung to him. The darkness, the tense silence, the sense that Event Horizon wasn't just a fake set, but something watching, as if the set wasn't built merely to be filmed but to force the actors to live inside it. The film tells the story of a ship that drives people mad. The chilling part is how close it came to doing that for real. 13. Early drafts didn't even include Hells. Few people realise that in the earliest drafts, Event Horizon didn't involve hell at all. It was a fairly standard sci-fi horror slimy aliens, tentacles, body snatchers in the vein of Alien. The fear came from something invading from the outside. Paul W. S. Anderson hated that. He didn't want to make another monster movie. He didn't want something you could point at and say, "That's the creature." Anderson wanted something more ambiguous, deeper damnation. He rewrote the script, erasing the aliens entirely. In their place came hallucinations, mutilated bodies, and visions pulled straight from each character's darkest fears. The horror was no longer something hunting them. It was the ship turning their guilt into a weapon. That pivot transformed the film from a routine thriller into a religious nightmare where space-age science collides head-on with biblical terror. And it was something Paramount was never mentally prepared to receive. 12. To reach the heart of the ship, you must pass through the 9 circles of hell. There's a detail in Event Horizon that chills me every time I revisit it, the tunnel leading to the engine core. A rotating space of spinning razor-edged metal rings as if shredding anything that passes through. It doesn't feel like engineering. It feels like ritual. The design wasn't accidental. It draws directly from Inferno, where one must pass through the 9 circles of hell to reach the center of sin. Each circle is a punishment. Each step is a stripping away. Event Horizon doesn't explain this in dialogue. It shows you. To reach the ship's heart, there are no shortcuts. Only pain. Only moving forward, even knowing you're approaching something you should never touch. That's the film's philosophy. There is no free knowledge. Every step of human progress carries a price, and sometimes that price is yourself. 11. The future hidden in the flags. If you look closely at the flags on the uniforms, Event Horizon quietly hints at a rewritten future. The American flag no longer has 50 stars, but 55, as if 5 new states have silently appeared. Australia's flag removes the Union Jack, entirely replacing it with a design inspired by Indigenous art, a symbolic severing from colonial history. European symbols appear in ways that make the film's future feel both unified and fractured. These aren't throwaway props. They're subtle reminders that the future isn't just about space. It's about history, identity, and power, quietly redrawn. In the world of Event Horizon, humanity hasn't only crossed physical boundaries, it has crossed the lines it once drew for itself. Sound is half of hell. Anderson understood one thing clearly. If Event Horizon were frightening only through visuals, it wouldn't linger. He wanted sound to scrape the bones, sharp, spiked, industrial, like machinery grinding flesh. His first choice was Orbital. Paramount thought it was too strange, too niche. A bizarre compromise followed when Michael Kamen, best known for Die Hard and Lethal Weapon, was brought in. But instead of pushing Orbital out, Kamen pulled them in alongside him. The result was a score unlike anything else, somber orchestration fused with chaotic electronics. Drums pounding like sledgehammers, strings shrieking like screams. Electronic beats turning hell into a cold, skin-crawling rave. It doesn't sound like Star Trek. It sounds like the gates of hell have just opened and they're keeping time. And no matter how much the film was cut down, that sound remains intact, dragging the audience down with it. 9. A $60 million budget a summer slot and only $42 million at the box office. On its release day, Event Horizon looked like a massive gamble. A $60 million budget, a prime summer slot, marketed as a big sci-fi blockbuster. Then the box office answered with a cold number, $42 million. Not just below expectations, a freefall. The sting was sharper when compared to another title from the same studio, Titanic. While Event Horizon struggled in theatres, Titanic was being polished into a legend preparing to shatter every record. One ship sinking on screen became a historic triumph. The other drifted into obscurity. Paramount reacted quickly and very Hollywood. No sequel, no further discussion or defense. Event Horizon was labelled wasted potential and buried under new projects as if it had never existed. But films don't always die in theatres. Sometimes they die in the light and are reborn in the dark. In video stores where expectations were gone, Event Horizon began to attract the curious. What had been dismissed as a disaster was quietly preparing for a second life on VHS. 8. Kurt Russell said one line that sounded like prophecy. Event Horizon's failure wasn't confined to the box office. It weighed heavily on the people who made it. Paul W.S. Anderson was at a fragile moment, fresh off success, then hit by a painful fall. He felt he had gone too far and been punished for it. Then Soldier brought him together with Kurt Russell. In offset conversations, Anderson vented about Event Horizon, how it had been torn apart, criticised, forgotten. Russell listened, didn't rush to argue, then said something very simple. Forget the box office. This movie will live. At the time, it sounded like consolation, an old pro comforting a younger director. Time turned it into prophecy. As VHS and DVD spread, Event Horizon returned quietly but persistently. Viewers passed it hand to hand. Fans defended it with feeling, not scores. What had once been called trash began to outlast every verdict. Russell was right. Some films don't win in the present, they just need to survive long enough. 7. Paramount thought they were buying Star Trek just a bit darker. When Paramount bought the script, they imagined something slick and easy to sell. Something like Star Trek, only slightly darker. Optimism, spectacle, hope. What Anderson delivered was Hellraiser in orbit blood, running down walls, bodies torn apart, and a ship that looked like a Gothic cathedral drifting toward hell. Studio executives panicked. Someone reportedly shouted, "We're the studio that makes Star Trek." Marketing collapsed into confusion. They didn't know whether to sell the film as a blockbuster or as horror. The trailer promised a space adventure. Audiences walked into theatres and fell into madness. That tonal mismatch haunted Event Horizon from day one. People came to explore and were trapped in a nightmare. The very nightmare Paramount had never intended to fund. 6. The Latin message doesn't say, "Save me," it says, "Save yourself." When the horrifying signal plays in the film, most viewers hear a plea, "Save me." It sounds like a desperate call from the lost ship, like there's still hope. But it's a mishearing. The Latin message doesn't say, "Save me." It says, "Save yourself." A small difference with a merciless meaning. No one is waiting to be rescued. No hero is coming in time. Event Horizon doesn't promise salvation. It states plainly, if there's a way out, it's your responsibility. The tragedy is that the characters mishear it too. They believe they can fix things, turn back, pull each other out. The ship doesn't share that belief. It simply reflects what's deepest inside them, guilt, shame, fear, and lets them destroy themselves. So, the title Event Horizon is a death sentence. Some film titles are just names. Event Horizon isn't. It's a verdict pronounced from the very beginning. In astrophysics, an event horizon is the boundary around a black hole. There is no way back. Once you cross it, no signal escapes, not even light. And because we see by light beyond that boundary, the very concept of seeing no longer exists. The film doesn't explain this at length. It simply places the name on the poster and lets everything unfold. The ship called Event Horizon isn't merely cursed. From the moment it's named, it's defined as something no one should ever cross. 4. Event Horizon is buried under an official lie. In the government's official records, Event Horizon didn't open a gate to hell. It merely suffered a reactor accident. A tidy, sterile story we've heard before. A technical failure, an unfortunate incident. No demons, no experiments beyond limits, no moral questions that need answering. That familiarity is what makes it terrifying, because it's the language of every real-world disaster. From nuclear to biological to buried projects throughout history, there's always a technical malfunction presented to the public and another truth buried behind it. Event Horizon isn't just a horror film. It's a story about science outrunning ethics, then leaving the consequences to people who were never asked for consent. The ship is erased from history not because it failed, but because it succeeded in a way no one dares to admit. 3. Event Horizon directly inspired Dead Space. If you've ever played Dead Space and felt an unsettling sense of familiarity that isn't an accident, a living ship, hallucinations of dead loved ones, space turned into hell, sacrifice without salvation, Dead Space doesn't hide it. It directly inherits Event Horizon's DNA. The Ishimura isn't haunted. In a traditional ghostly sense, it mirrors the human mind, twists memory, and weaponizes emotion. Exactly what Event Horizon did a decade earlier. If Event Horizon was an early warning, Dead Space is the descendant that grew up with that fear, refining it, sharpening it, and placing it in the player's hands. A film that once failed in theaters became the seed for an entire lineage of space horror games. 2. The original cut was far darker and has been buried. What you see on screen is already the toned-down version. The original cut of Event Horizon contained scenes the studio couldn't allow to exist. Bodies nailed to metal teeth, drilled medieval-style torture-raw body horror with no restraint. Test audiences were too shocked. Some fainted, some vomited. Paramount panicked, and Hollywood's familiar reflex kicked in cut. Dozens of minutes were removed. The hell flashes were reduced to blink-and-you-miss-it fragments, long enough for the brain to register, not long enough to understand. Worse still, the original footage was lost. Some reels were damaged in storage, others survived only on degraded VHS tapes, impossible to restore. The scariest thing isn't what was cut. It's the truth that the most terrifying version of Event Horizon will never be seen. A film about hell that lost its own hell. 1. It died in theaters but became forbidden on VHS. Event Horizon died in theaters but lived in the shadows. In dorm rooms, basements, late-night screenings, the film played like contraband. People whispered about the missing scenes like a curse. At conventions, bootleg tapes were passed hand to hand. One person dared another. Do you have the guts to watch this? The jagged edits, once criticised as chaotic, became intimate and unsettling under the pale blue glow of CRT televisions. The gothic mood was no longer swallowed by a giant screen, it pressed right up against the viewer's face. No crowded theatre, no social escape, just you and the ship. By the early 2000s, Event Horizon was no longer a forgotten flop. It had become a rite of passage for horror fans. A film you were supposed to see even if you weren't sure you wanted to. Some films end with the words, "The end." Event Horizon doesn't. It ends with a lingering unease, as if the ship never truly vanished but is simply drifting more slowly, waiting for someone else to touch it. After all the behind-the-scenes stories, the cut footage, the rushed decisions, the official lies, and a lost, hellish cut, Event Horizon emerges not as a Hollywood misstep, but as a boundary-crossing experiment with lasting after-effects. If this film haunted you in its own way, leave a comment. I'd love to know what mark Event Horizon left on you. And if you want to keep diving deep like this, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos.